Hello, we are live. This is Ryan Munn on Interchain Live, and we have Lyn Ulbricht with us today. Lyn, we met, actually, you were speaking down in Philadelphia, and we had, I thought, a wonderful conversation. Share with us what brought you to all these speaking events. You've been traveling around quite a bit.
Yeah, well, I need to get the word out about my son, and I need to get signatures for his clemency petition. I drag around this big 8-foot banner, which was at that conference. Coinvention was the name of it, and just to try to promote his freedom. And I'm up against a lot of foes. I'm up against the government. I'm up against the media in general, mainstream media. And I really see it as a grassroots effort, which it has been. And we just hit 85,000 signatures today on the petition, which is great. And it's really special because today is a very unhappy anniversary for us because it's 5 years that Ross has been in prison. But we reached 85,000 today, which is a milestone, and we're not giving up. But in order to keep a grassroots movement going, you have to meet people and talk to them and explain to them. And I find that when I actually meet people, that it makes a real difference. And it does for me too. I mean, meeting you in person. And then I saw you up on the screen, like, oh yeah, it's just a whole different connection. Even though Skype and Hangouts are great, it's not the same as in person, right? So
Absolutely.
So this way, and I get a lot of energy and support from the conferences, although they are, they're somewhat tiring at times. But and I consistently reach people who don't know, even though might be at a Bitcoin conference or something like that. So it's really, sometimes I'm like, I'm too tired to travel, and then I'm like, nah, I got to do it. I don't do it all the time or anything, but
Right.
Usually when I'm asked and they help me get there, I'll pretty much do it if I can.
Absolutely. Well, I want to drop it early. freeross.org is where people can go to really read into this, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But you're a mother fighting for the freedom of her son. But I also, I think, I'm a big passionate supporter of adjusting our legal system in light of what we see in regards to nonviolent offenders, and we have a lot of challenges in our system to begin with. But in particular, when we talk about freeross.org, we're not just talking about getting somebody out of prison, maybe even did something that he deserves some kind of punishment for, but we're talking about the whole process being inaccurate, ineffective, and quite frankly, scary for the future liberty of all of us, not just Americans, but worldwide, given that, America is this leading superpower. And they're really trying, in many ways, it seems, to redefine the framework of how law is applied. So if you would chime in here, please.
Sure.
What is kind of like the core message that has all of these people that you meet, kind of one-off at a conference, at a Bitcoin conference? What is it that sort of connects them to you and your mission personally?
Okay, well, let me just address what you just said, which was very well said. But I would say that actually the criminal justice system is very effective. You said it was ineffective. It's effective. It's effective to create mass incarceration. It's effective in putting nonviolent people in prison for their lives. And this is a new thing. This is not what America used to do.
Right.
This is life sentences have quintupled since the 80s.
I do refer to the mission of rehabilitation and of a better society being the ineffectiveness.
Well,
I fully appreciate
You're right,
that.
because they call it correctional. I'm like, really? It's correctional? I thought it was a criminal training program in there. But in any case, it's very effective at making lots of money for lots of people, both private and government. It's very effective at eviscerating our constitutional protections because there's this drug exception, and they just look at civil asset forfeiture. So it's very effective in a lot of ways. It just doesn't stop people from using drugs. The drug war doesn't. It's been for over 45 years and over $1 trillion and climbing. And the mass incarceration situation is outrageous. It's an abomination. It's a human rights crisis, and it's a national disgrace. It's like we're America, and we imprison more of our people, not only our people, other people, than any country in the world. And, like I say, didn't used to be like this. Life sentences have quintupled. When I was growing up, hardly anybody got life sentence, and they had to be a mass murdering maniac. Now there's over 17,000 non-violent people with life, many drug offenders. There's, if you count virtual life, which is, you're going to die in there because it's such a long sentence, that's like over 200,000 non-violent people. Wow. And it's like, really? What is the reason for this? This is not right. And it's not American. It's against our values. And, I'm just like, could we just go back to the pre-drug war America where, the prison population was around 180,000. Many people that came before a judge weren't even sent to prison. Now they're all sent to prison, all of them. You don't go before a judge in a court and be judged guilty and not go to jail. Used to be you didn't necessarily. It was up to the judge. And
it's funny you say, it didn't used to be this way, and yet there's certain things that some of the language around the trials really remind me of some of the old black and white stuff you can find about like the communist trials, right? Where we were calling out these socialist activists in America, and by all means, some of these people were inciting violence, but there were plenty of people that were simply expressing their thoughts and coming before sort of American Inquisition, if you will, in persecution. And,
it's been a long time coming. I didn't mean to say that there weren't grievous violations and offenses.
Sure.
It's the numbers. It's the numbers. It's the casual attitude about life sentences. And it's worse. That's all. It's just the same trend.
Absolutely.
Getting worse. And it's
and I think that's the point, is that a lot of people have this sense that like things have gotten better, and they have in some ways. We've had certainly, a grievous, issues in the past, in the history of America. But Americans kind of operate on this sort of idealistic idea of like, the good old days and where we're going. And the reality is that there's this very scary undertone of power and control and managed transfer of wealth through systemic failures, corruption, and just plain not well implemented solutions, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think it's something that's been growing and growing and growing. I think the drug war has accelerated it tremendously. And it's basically the drug war is used to fill the prisons. It's just gotten worse in terms of numbers of people being basically persecuted. Used to be, whether they were totally fair or not every time, we had trial by jury that maybe meant something. Now, 98% of people plead guilty because they're bullied and threatened by prosecutors that if you go to trial, you're going to lose, and then you're going to get a worse sentence. So it's almost like trial by jury is becoming extinct.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that brings up another really important point. So we have all these sort of drug offenses and things, but we also, we have this due process designed into our system for a reason, so that, there's these ideas of precedent and these ideas of actually knowing who your accusers are and what you're accused of, and having the facts revealed in a due process that enables the concept of justice to come to light. And unfortunately, I think in so many cases, like you're saying, it doesn't even make it to trial because it never, the influenceability of the person in question, of the alleged criminal, is completely under the control of the system and of the police officers or the district attorneys or prosecutors. And so ultimately we end up with a very, very biased system. But talk a little bit, if you will, about where, we can really be going in terms of how that process is potentially being corrupted by some of the trials and cases that have gone on, and how scary that can be for really every American when all of a sudden who we do business with can suddenly make us accomplice in criminal enterprise.
Conspirator. They love to call people conspirators. You're in a conspiracy.
Right.
But we tried with the Supreme Court. Our Ross's legal team submitted a really powerful cert petition on two very important issues. That one of them was that you have the right to be judged by a jury of your peers, and the judge in his case violated. That's in the Sixth Amendment. It was written to protect the accused from a rogue judge or prosecutor. This judge used uncharged, unconvicted allegations, never ruled on by a jury, to enhance her life sentence, which was a few of them, and one of them was murder for hire, but they're never proven. It's been dismissed now completely, and she enhanced her sentence with that. That is no, we have a constitution for a reason, supposedly. And the other one, which is also important to everyone, is that it basically said the government violates the Fourth Amendment when it delves into all of your internet browsing and activity and history without a warrant, without probable cause, in secret, with no oversight. And the court didn't care. So just so you know, they can, as of now, legally, secretly go into all your internet activity and use it against you. They can blackmail officials with it. They can do whatever they want with it. They can persecute people for it. They can do anything they want. And this should be protected by the Fourth Amendment, and it's not. So,
well, not to mention, nobody in the world pretty much has secure passwords. So, all of these things could happen even on behest of some automation, and people can be suddenly held and found responsible for it because some unwarranted search found history and details.
And I mean, it's so easy to frame. And of course, most of the evidence in Ross's case was digital. Right. Now, listen, a mortgage company won't even take a screenshot of a bank statement because they know how easily faked it is. You have to bring in that bank statement in a physical statement. But the court was like, oh, yeah, what's on the screen is, oh, yeah, that's definitely true. And showing this big screen to the jury. And they're like, oh, just like TV. Yeah, it's true. Oh, yeah, it must be true. It's like it's so easily tampered with. I've had experts say it's child's play, that they do it all the time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's funny because I even heard testimony from a former police commissioner about how blockchain is not actually that new. They've been chaining evidentiary data for decades, where they take the data that's there and they create a hash, and then they add that to the new data, create a new hash, so that the evidence record here is tied to the history, so it can't be easily altered. And yet they've chosen for decades not to interlink that with all other precincts, so that that data chain is more accountable and more reliable, right? And yet they all throw their hands in the air. What's this blockchain
kind of thing? Inconvenient sometimes.
Well, but that's just it. If all the precincts actually just had that data being shared, it wouldn't really be, it wouldn't nearly be as corruptible. And yet we still have, evidence, being potentially tampered with in different situations. Not to mention, like you said, things being submitted that are hardly evidentiary, that are just seen as evidentiary because we have a society trained to believe what's on a screen.
Yeah, and they mess up DNA. There's all kinds of innocent people in prison that have been released because it turns out, oh, gee, the DNA was wrong or whatever. They, if they mess that up, can you imagine what they do with digital stuff?
Yeah.
I mean, they can do whatever they want, and you cannot tell if digital evidence has been tampered with. I've talked to experts about it. It's impossible to tell that digital evidence has been altered in any way. Just the last version, that's what it is. So
yeah, it's scary. It's scary.
It is scary. Terribly scary precedent.
Anybody can have a whole case built against them on potentially completely false and misleading data.
Yep. Yes, tell me about it. Yes, they can.
So let's talk a little bit about what some people might be able to do initially for your cause and in general to try to get their voice heard that this is not okay, that these things need to be addressed.
Yeah, well, like I said, we try to do it through the courts. We're trying to, of course, the petition is really focused on Ross, but I feel like it can help set, this sentence, this horrible sentence, double life plus 40 years without parole. And if you go to freeross.org/petition, you'll see the petition itself and how it's now at 85,000. And so that will help other people too. But also, spread the word. Social media is a very powerful tool as well, even if sometimes, it's not reliable. I don't know. I am personally I know some people disagree, but I think we need to change the law and we need to work in Washington to do that. For better or worse, that's who has the power. And so I think the movement towards criminal justice reform and ending the drug war is,
And I already
happening.
did.
Thank you.
I've already signed, so please, everyone else, please go out there and sign this. Now, like I said, I want to try to separate a little bit of this, because I think, Lyn, you carry a really good voice about this, in that, yeah, this is your son you're talking about. So obviously, you're passionate about, your son's life and his freedom. But I'm in full agreement with freeross.org, but it's a lot for people to digest. And I think what the real key point here is that there was basically a complete failure to follow, a traditional due process, because our legal system seems to be, and not just in this case, but in many others that people can find information about, a regard to cyberspace and digital space as somehow different than the real world. And I'm going to kind of take this opportunity to just kind of use an analogy. A hard drive is just a bunch of information, and running software is just the same as a person using their brain to interpret the information and project it, right? So whether we have a library full of books or a hard drive full of data, and whether we have a person reading those books to their friends, neighbors, or public, or a piece of software broadcasting information across the internet, it's really no different, in my opinion. It's First Amendment. It's a right to free speech. It's a right to retain information. It's a right to privacy. And so, I think that there's a huge problem when we start pulling the books off of our shelves or our neighbors' shelves, and essentially, burning them in the street, and then telling stories about what were actually in them and what they were actually doing and capable of.
Well, that's the fundamental playbook of a totalitarian regime.
Exactly. So that's why I think that this case is so important, to realize that this is exactly what we've done. Dread Pirate Roberts, what a scary name. Hits for hire, what a scary idea. But the reality is that, first of all, people can probably, and I don't know this for a fact, but I'm a statistics kind of guy. There's a very high likelihood that people can go today to go find a hit for hire on the dark web somewhere, right?
Yeah, there wasn't any on Silk Road, by the way. There was no hit.
Exactly, and that's my point, is that activity is still out there. It's still possible. It's still at the access.
Drugs are out there too, but yeah, exactly.
It's still at the but here's the point: it's still at the access of American and other foreign assets all around the world, which is why a lot of these resources exist to begin with. It was to create resources, like you said, for denizens of totalitarian regimes, and to enable American foreign operatives and other foreign operatives to be able to operate outside of these totalitarian regimes. And now here we are, in reaction to those technologies, becoming a totalitarian regime. And so it's really important that people become aware of that reality, that the falsehoods that have been spread around this case are really a damage to our entire society.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Actually, there's a couple of First Amendment issues. One of the amicus briefs in Ross's Supreme Court petition focuses on the First Amendment. But in addition, the judge cited Ross's philosophy and political beliefs as one of the reasons she gave him life. She said, "We know you started the site for philosophical reasons, and I'm just not sure you've given those that philosophy up. So I guess I find it troubling, I find it dangerous, and so I'm going to put you in a cage for life." I mean, This is not permitted by the First Amendment, and yet she got away with it. And just to kind of expand on what you were saying, because it is about Ross, and I think the precedent that could be set, well, is being set now, is terrible because sentencing is so excessive in this country. But it also could be a good thing if he is commuted in sentence, because it shows these excessive sentences can be changed and are wrong and should change. But it's also about, and so in that sense, it's also about other people. I mean, I'm out there talking about Ross and shining a spotlight through Ross's high-profile case on this situation. But Ross and I both, and our family, wants this to be used for the greater good too. I'm in touch with many families of inmates. We've helped to put other inmates' petitions up. We are working and have associations with groups like, say, Buried Alive, which is a great group that's focusing on nonviolent drug offenders serving life and getting that changed. I mean, and others, several others. I mean, I don't want to forget anybody, but it's like
Sure.
people working for reform. And so to me, it's a bigger fight. And if Ross got out tomorrow, I'd still be waging it because I've gotten to know the families and the kids who come and visit, and some of the inmates actually in visiting, that these kids, you see them shattered at the end of a visit. They're being dragged away from their father. They're crying and sobbing. These kids are being damaged. They're being hurt right now from this. And they're more likely to end up in prison too. That's statistics. And
we're hurting
2.9
ourselves.
million of them have incarcerated parents in this country. This is wrong. And many are nonviolent. Or I think it's 60% of the prisons are filled with drug offenders. It's like 60%. If the drug war ended, I don't know, all these towns that rely on the prison would have a depression.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Unfortunately, that's the side effect that we're going to have to tolerate if we're going to make things right in this country. So let's talk a little bit about this anniversary. And you have an event coming up that we don't have on the website yet, but you said there's some interesting things coming up.
Yeah, we're going to push it out on social media today, actually, once we get it all pulled together. It's actually a project that's been in the works for a year, and it's been a monster. It is basically a narrative of the record, because as you said before, it's kind of a confusing, complicated case. It's hard to wrap your head around. There's so many aspects to it. So we've taken the public record. We can't get it, the sealed evidence, the undisclosed, the encrypted that the government will not release. I'd love to see it. But we have the public record, and we've written it out in a way that's sequential and easy to understand and kind of interesting. It kind of reads like a crime novel, or not novel, but it's pretty interesting. And we've got a fantastic reader, a professional reader who's a supporter, who donated his time to read this. So we have an audio version and a written version, and we're going to put it up in 6 episodes. And the first one's going up today. Ross is, 5 years in prison, and it'll be on. You'll be able to get to it from freeross.org. There'll be a link, and I think it'll be very interesting for people. There's a lot of stuff in there that I didn't know until I started delving into it, that I wasn't really clear on. And there's a lot of interesting stuff. So anyway, we're doing that because we really feel like at the least, the public record should be known. And Absolutely. What happened in trial. And let's be transparent here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I agree very much. And I want to thank you for joining us today.
Oh, my pleasure.
I would love to have a follow-up conversation in the future and try to keep track of how many folks out there sign up for that petition. And at the very least, if you don't feel comfortable signing up for it yet, I know there's a lot of information to absorb to decide maybe if you really do agree with us, but take the time. It's essential that you understand how these things can happen and become precedent to just violating our human rights in the future.
Let me just say, if you don't agree with it, and it's fine with a lot of things about this, if you think it's okay for a nonviolent first-time offender with no victims named at trial to get double life plus 40 years without parole, no chance of getting out, if you don't think that's right, you think it's a little much, sign the petition.
Thank you. For putting it that concisely, because that's the point, is that there's something wrong with this, and people need to stand up and protect themselves by protecting another of our society.
It was used as a punishment. It was used as an example. It was government abuse of power, plain and simple. And it shouldn't be allowed. This is not what's right in this country or anywhere.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you, Lyn, so much for joining us today. Thank you all for joining us in the audience and listening to us and hearing us out. I hope that you all go to freeross.org and learn about this and make your voice known, add your name to the list, and let the government know and let this organization know that you have our back, and that it's not okay to continue to violate human rights and to keep pushing this envelope further and further. We need to stand up for ourselves and protect the Constitution and protect the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness that this country is built on. So thank you again, Lyn, so much for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.